So there's been a story out in the last kind of couple of days here in New Zealand pertaining to schoolboy rugby, particularly here in Auckland. And the issue that's been mainly talked about is the idea of some schools poaching, stealing, enticing, taking players from other teams to come and play for their first 15. So a very quick summary of the story that's gone on here in Auckland is that one of the schools, St Kennigan's College, which is a private school here, one of the top schools basically, always academically and in sports, one of the top schools in the country. They compete in the top Auckland Schoolboy Rugby competition, the 1A, and the other 10, I think is it 10 of the other teams from that competition, there's only 12 teams in the competition, 10 of them have decided to boycott that school. So they're saying, we're not going to play you this year because you poached too many players. And the issue mainly came about because they apparently signed 5 players for this coming season from other schools first 15. So they picked some of the best players up from schools throughout New Zealand. To come and play for their school. Come up to Auckland. None of the guys are from Auckland that they've poached. As far as I understand it, I'm definitely not an expert on the ins and outs of the legality of transfers in schoolboy rugby, but you're not allowed to sign players from other schools in Auckland, so they've looked from outside Auckland, and you're only allowed to have 6, which are have played for like other first 15s in any one season. So they've got 5, and the other schools, 10 of them, have basically said, that's not it's not fair that you guys are doing this, and we're not going to play you this season. They wanted them to sign an agreement, basically, which said, a kind of a code of conduct, how schools should act in terms of signing players, and the school, St Kennigan's, refused, so the other teams have decided to boycott them. When I was a student, it was kind of pretty common knowledge that the big schools always got the best players. The school I went to was far from a top sporting school or academic school, so we didn't have the best team. Nobody was being enticed to come and play for our school, that's for sure. Any players we had were guys that were kind of homegrown and just went through the ranks and ended up playing for the first 15. And that's kind of what some of the schools who are complaining about this practice are saying. Like, one of the principals of one of the schools that has lost the player to St. Ken's is saying, our teachers worked hard on him, one of the students, for 3 years academically, and he's done really well. And now St. Ken's are reaping the benefits not only from the academic staff but also sporting-wise. So they're saying, we didn't just keep him as a star rugby player, we helped him along with his studies, and now all that hard work we've put in, that other school is getting. It's not a simple one because even Rico Ioane has come out and commented on this, I think on his Instagram, and basically said that you don't run from, just because they recruit doesn't mean you pull the plug. Don't run from the competition. Basically, you want to beat the best. You want to be the best, you got to beat the best, is what he's saying. So perhaps making the competition better. That's one point. Having all the best players playing in that competition, I suppose in theory as a player, can make you better. If you are playing top teams from around Auckland every week, then you are going to get better as a player because, if you're playing guys who are good, you're going to have to be good to play against them. But then there is that question of player development. On one side, you've got the school that loses the player saying, we invested all this time and effort into this player. But then from the player's point of view, you could look at it as an opportunity. Maybe that new school has got better training facilities, better coaches, more money to spend, especially as a private school. More money to spend on rugby. So perhaps as a player, I would be looking to go there to give myself the best chance of making a professional hash of being a rugby player. So if I want to develop, maybe I'm better off going to that school. So there's kind of two sides to that coin. And then there's also there's also the issue of money in sports because, well, school sports, money in sports is normal. Totally natural that, and people talk about it with talent coming from financially less well-off countries who recruit players, to play for their national team. It's always a big issue in rugby. It fires people up a bit, but at schoolboy level as well, the big schools with all the money. Giving full scholarships, and that's the way they do it. They're offering these kids, they can't offer them money, as far as I'm aware, but they offer them full scholarships where the board is taken care of, if they're at a boarding school, and, they don't have to worry about a thing. They basically just come up from wherever they are, full support here, and then in theory they get a best shot at a top-notch education and good sports training. So that doesn't sit well with some people, the idea that schools with more money can kind of push around schools who aren't as well off, because you can kind of get it with rugby clubs, because their motivation is to make money and to succeed on the pitch, whereas schools are there mostly to teach people, and the sports is just kind of an extracurricular activity. But it seems to be that the prestige gained from having a top rugby team is very important in some circles. St. Kent's did say that the 10 schools which have decided to boycott his school, the principal has kind of said they're acting out of self-interest, and that his school is following the rules. So they haven't broken any rules by acting the way they're acting. He said, we don't recruit young players because we don't need to. We get dozens and dozens of aspiring young players through their families applying to us every year, and we only accept those who will benefit from our program and will bring something to the school. So, yeah, he's arguing that they don't want all these guys to come into their team, but they just get a lot of applicants. So it's an interesting one. I'm a little bit cynical about it, I must admit, and the fact that he's saying, we didn't want all these star players to apply to our school, but what are we going to do if they apply? We've got to consider them. So it is an interesting one. I'm curious to see how this is as an issue throughout the rest of the world outside New Zealand, also outside Auckland. I know in South Africa there was a story not long ago about doping in schools. So in Craven Week, I think it was 6 guys which was the big schools tournament in South Africa. 6 guys were busted with some kind of doping. I'm assuming steroids for the most part. And there does seem to be that mentality that, if you're going to make it as a rugby player, you need to get spotted early. So by the time you're 18, it's too late. You need to be spotted by the time you're 16 or maybe 17, maybe 15. You need to be on the radar of some scouts, and you need to get bigger, you need to get stronger. And I guess in this regard, you need to be going to the top school. If you're playing for the top team, you're more likely to get spotted. It's harder to get spotted if you're a really great player on a really poor team. I mean, we see that with national team selections. The guys, I've got a video coming out about the Cheetahs and the Kings. How many Springbok guys were coming from the Kings when they were the bottom team? It's even if you're a good player, if you're on a team that's not doing well, you're unlikely to get chosen. So I guess that's the same logic of some of these young men and their parents perhaps as well. But yeah, it's just an interesting story. As I said, I'm a little bit cynical about players being poached at schoolboy level, but I do understand the logic of a kid who wants to go to a school with all the best stuff if it's going to be for free. I mean, would any of us turn down an opportunity to make more money or to get more whatever? If you can put yourself selfishly in a better position, I think most of us are going to do it. It's just whether that's kind of right for the rest of us. I can see the flip side of it as well. If you're the guy, because one of the guys they recruited, St. Kent's, is a number 9, a halfback. If you've been that number 9 for the school for like the last year, or you were playing second fiddle and then that guy's graduated, so it's now your year to be the guy, and then they recruit somebody else in and takes your spot, you're going to be pretty annoyed. It's not very fair to you who've done your service to the school, and now they're just bringing somebody else to take your spot. So it's kind of hard to compare it with the professional stuff, because at the end of the day, these are schools, and you feel like they shouldn't have it's survival of the fittest. It kind of is, but you feel like at school, perhaps it quite shouldn't be at that level. I don't know. You guys let me know your thoughts. I'll link some of the information that I talked about in the description, so you guys can read the stories if you haven't read it. As I said, it's basically recruiting players from other schools with scholarships is the main issue, and the other schools, some of them publicly funded ones, not big fans of that. I think the other school who signed the kind of code of conduct but hasn't boycotted St. Kitts is King's, which is another private school. So I guess that kind of makes sense as well. But anyway, you guys let me know your thoughts on how you think this situation, what you think about, how does it sit with you, and yeah, I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.